The New York Giants snap a 4-game losing streak with a big win over the Washington Commanders. We have some thoughts about how the game unfolded on today's edition of the Locked On Giants podcast coming your way next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel Sports, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. Patricia Traina here, P-Train, and finally a win to talk about. It's been such a long time. Over a month, actually. The Giants snapping a 4-game losing streak by defeating the Washington Commanders 14-7. It was a little closer than it needed to be, but, a win is a win, and we'll take it. And on today's program, we will be talking about some of the good and some of the bad. There were some bad things, some things that are still concerning. So we'll talk about that to begin with. Then we'll talk about Brian Daboll, and did he really go there? Did he really crack open the door for a potential quarterback controversy debate? Afraid he did, folks. And I'll tell you what I mean. That'll be coming up in segment 2. And then in segment 3, the trade deadline is fast approaching. So did this win against the Washington Commanders change perhaps anything the Giants might be looking to do? So we'll talk about that later on in the program. So that is our agenda. As always, thank you so much for making us your first listener today. Or if you watch on YouTube, your first watch of the day. And we, of course, are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including on YouTube. Just like, subscribe, and smash that little bell so that you always get notices whenever we have an updated podcast here. All right, let's get into it. Giants 14-7. What did I like? Folks, the future is bright for this team in 2 areas. And these 2 areas were actually on display for the Giants in this game. One on offense, one on defense. I'm going to start with the defensive side of the ball. Adoree Jackson, as you guys probably know by now, was inactive because he's dealing with a neck injury. That put Trey Hawkins, who started the year off and, struggled a little bit, so they benched him for a bit to kind of collect his thoughts. So you had Trey Hawkins and Deonte Banks as your outside cornerbacks. Ladies and gentlemen, I love the job these 2 kids did. All right. You talk about sticky coverage. I mean, they were all over Washington's receivers, so much so that Scary Terry McLaurin, Washington's number 1 receiver, had 1 target in the first half of the game, didn't catch it. And I think he didn't catch his first target until well into the 3rd quarter. So a lot of, his final numbers more or less, came as the game wore on in the second half. But McLaurin was not a factor, in the grand scheme of things. So I really liked the coverage and the job done by those 2 young cornerbacks. I thought that was very, very positive for the team. Like I said, the future looks bright for those 2. And you've got them both on the same, time length. So, you figure after this year, the Giants will move on from Adoree Jackson if they don't trade him beforehand. And, the future looks bright for the Giants' 2 young cornerbacks. Now, on the other side of the ball, let's talk about the young receivers, Jalin Hyatt and Wan'Dale Robinson. The Giants had something like 7 big plays of 20 or more yards between running and passing. All right, so a big play is technically 20 plus yards for a pass, 10 plus yards for a run. 3 of the big plays that the Giants had in this game were from Hyatt and Robinson. Hyatt had 2, Robinson had 1. All right, so, you look at these young receivers, very promising. Again, the future is very bright for these 2. And, I talked to Hyatt after the game, really nice kid. And I said to him, Jalen, you're coming along so beautifully. I said, what haven't we seen from you as far as your game goes? And very modestly, he said, I haven't shown that I'm a complete receiver. And I said, well, what do you mean? I said, you can get deep. I said, you've got speed. What haven't you shown? He says, I want to be more than just be known as more than just a deep threat. He says, I want to be, an underneath guy. I want to be a yards after the catch guy. He said, there's so much more that I could do. He says, I want to work on my blocking. So he's coming along, and I attribute the slow start that he had, the fact that he wasn't getting a lot of reps. I think that was more or less him growing into the role that he has. All right. So he was receiving extra coaching and he was growing into that role. And so far, he's coming along beautifully. All right. So you look at him, you look at Wan'Dale Robinson, who's your yards after the catch specialist. The Giants are potentially set at receiver for the future. So a lot to like there, as well as this youth movement continues to, infiltrate the Giants in a good way. What else did I like in this win? The run defense only allowed 76 yards on 19 carries, 1 touchdown. That's been a problem for the Giants. It looks like the run defense has kind of settled down a little bit. The pass rush, 6 sacks by the Giants in this game against a Washington team who, coming in, had given up the most sacks against its quarterback. The Giants, of the 6 sacks they had, 3 of them came on 3rd and long. And in the first half alone, when the Giants recorded 5 sacks, they doubled their 2023 total, which is pretty wild considering. So the pass rush, definitely something to like about. A couple of other things I really liked from the Giants from what I saw. They held Washington to 1 of 15 on 3rd down. That's a big win, situational football. And to that end, Washington was held to 1 of 3 on goal to go. So, we talk about situational football. We talk about stopping guys. The defense came to play. And, let me mention a few guys, individual efforts. Thibodeau, 4 total tackles, 1.5 sacks, 1 tackle for a loss, 2 quarterback hits. Not bad. Bobby Okereke, 11 tackles, led the team. Dexter Lawrence, 6 total tackles, 2 sacks, 1 tackle for a loss, 4 quarterback hits. Sexy Dexy came to play, folks. And, by the way, Leonard Williams got a sack in what I think was his best game to date, this season. So those guys really stepped up to the plate. In addition, Banks, I mentioned him. I mentioned Trey Hawkins. So the guys came to play. And there was certainly, a lot to like here. Now, what didn't I like from the game? There were a few things, besides the fact that the Giants probably should have scored more than 14 points. But there were 13 drives in this game, not counting the last one. And of those 13 drives, 6, the Giants offense went 3 and out. You ain't going to be a powerhouse offense if you're going to go 3 and out on the majority of your drives. The Giants really only had 3 solid drives, and one of them ended in the Saquon Barkley fumble. I think it was inside the red zone where he fumbled. So that wasn't good. Special teams. Special teams the last few weeks had kind of quieted down, settled down, and you thought, okay, maybe they've gotten over the hump. Not quite. I mean, I long for the days of a Dwayne Harris, all right, which, for those of you who don't remember who Dwayne Harris was, he was a Pro Bowl punt returner for this team. And Dwayne Harris, when he was back there, you knew he was going to make the right decision with the ball. The Giants have tried Eric Gray, and he ended up muffing another punt, which fortunately Nick McLeod recovered. And unfortunately, Gray got hurt on the play. I think he had a calf injury. But he continues to struggle with punt returns. Now, when Gray went down, they put Sterling Shepard in there. Shepard, who, hasn't really done it that much. He muffed the punt. And that punt was recovered by the Commanders, who then went in to score their touchdown. So after that happened, Darius Slayton went and finished as the punt returner. And I'm sitting there, and I'm talking with Ed Valentine, who I've had on the show before. And we're both saying, why don't they just put Darnay Holmes back there? He's done punt returns at least, And meanwhile, we're watching Jamison Crowder, who could have been the guy had the Giants not decided to move on from him. And he's having success returning punts for the Commanders. And we're just sitting here saying, my gosh, the Giants are at such a disadvantage because they don't have a legitimate punt returner. So didn't like that. Graham Gano missed a field goal. Now, to be fair to Graham Gano, he was on the injury report this week with the knee issue. So maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know. But uncharacteristically, Mr. Reliable hasn't always been Mr. Reliable. I think he's missed now 4 field goal attempts this year. If I'm not mistaken, he only missed 3 last year. So that's a little bit of a concern. So that being said, that brings us to our next topic, which is, did Brian Daboll actually go there and open the door a little bit for quarterback controversy? We'll talk about that right after this. Hey, Giant fans, our partner at eBay Motors has teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long, with players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. And this week, Vinny is recommending Jets wide receiver Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson will come off a bye and build on his momentum with an improved Zach Wilson to have a big game against the Giants in Week 8. Start spreading the news in this New York battle. The Giants' defensive secondary can't cover him well, and it's already given up big plays to Deebo Samuel, Tyreek Hill, and Stephon Diggs. Garrett Wilson is a great talent, and the Jets are now back to using him as a dominant number 1. Look for him to keep coming through with his best all-around game yet in fantasy in 2023. And Giant fans, while Vinny Iyer from Locked On Fantasy Football helps you to win your fantasy championship, know that eBay Motors knows a championship team is all about each player being a perfect fit. With over 122 million parts for your number 1 ride or die, you can make sure that your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. So keep your ride or die alive at ebay.com/motors. eBay's Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only, and exclusions apply. Welcome back, Giant fans, to segment 2 of the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. Thank you for tuning in as always. Did Brian Daboll open the door for quarterback controversy? Maybe just a little. And let me tell you what I mean. For a second week in a row, Tyrod Taylor managed the offense well. He moved the offense well, didn't look rattled, made smart decisions for the most part. Didn't put up, big numbers score-wise, but he got them a win after almost getting them a win last week. So you just knew that someone was going to ask the question, did Tyrod Taylor put himself into the discussion for quarterback moving forward, regardless if Daniel Jones is healthy? Now, all Daboll had to do is say, Daniel is our starting quarterback when he's ready to return. That would have been the end of it, right? That's what he did it last week when he was asked, do you anticipate there being not a controversy, but do you anticipate there being, a decision to be made there? And he basically said no. What did he say this week? All right, I'm going to read you the quote, what he said this week. He said, and I quote, "I would just say Tyrod had a good game this game, and he's a true pro, and I'm glad we've got him." All right, that was in response to a question. Did Tyrod put himself into consideration for the starting job, regardless of what Daniel Jones' status is? Now, again, folks, all Daboll had to do was say, nope, when Daniel comes back, when he is healthy, he's our starter. He didn't do that. So now you let the speculation run wild. All right. Now, for what it's worth, I think Daniel will be the starter when he is cleared to return to action. When that will be, that I don't know. All right. He's got to be cleared for contact before he can come back. What I do see, though, in the two quarterbacks and the differences between their play, Tyrod is calmer, like I said, doesn't get as rattled as much. Now, that could be because the offensive line has calmed down a little bit these last two games. Justin Pugh had a lot to do with that, by the way. That could be because Tyrod, didn't go through the shell shocking that Daniel went through earlier in the year. It could be because the coaches call things differently when Tyrod is in there as opposed to when Daniel is in there. Could be any number of things. But right now, I think if you were to compare the two quarterbacks, you could make a case that Daniel is shell-shocked and Tyrod's not there yet. So ergo, Tyrod is able to function a little bit better. I mean, he made a bunch of smart decisions, got the ball out of his hand quickly, and again, never looked rattled. When he had to run, he took off and he ran. He knew when to give himself up. So you just look at the two of them and you say, Tyrod now based on two games has looked better than Daniel. But again, to be fair to Daniel, his offensive line has been garbage. All right. Different combinations and they just haven't worked. Tyrod these last two games has had Saquon Barkley in the lineup, whereas Daniel only had Saquon in the lineup for what, 2 games to start the season? Saquon makes a difference. Tyrod has also had the young receivers kind of step up, whereas Daniel really didn't have, that luxury earlier in the year. You didn't really see a lot of passes going to Jalen Hyatt or to Wan'Dale Robinson. So to say that there's a controversy right now, I think you're not, you can't compare apples to apples. But that being said, all Daboll had to do was say, Daniel's our starter, period, end of story. And he didn't. He threw a bouquet to Tyrod Taylor, which was well-deserved, by the way, and basically ducked the question. So watch that now catch fire this week as people say, what's the story? Now, Tyrod, to his benefit, or to his credit, I should say, basically shot down any rumors or any speculation. He said, look, whatever they tell me to do, I'm going to do it. They want me to support Daniel, I'll support Daniel. They want me to start, I'll start. Tyrod being the good soldier. So don't go looking for Tyrod to campaign for, the starting job, because that's just not what he's going to do. So that all being said, there could be a controversy brewing. If Daboll is as intelligent as I believe he is, he'll shut that down when he talks to the media on Monday morning and say, look, Daniel's our guy. We're glad to have him. We're glad to have Tyrod. We're glad to have Tommy DeVito. We're glad to have everybody, That's what he needs to do, because if he doesn't, the story's going to grow wings. And gosh, the last thing you need is any kind of distraction in that locker room. They're coming off of a win everybody's feeling pretty good, to have, to not close the door on a potential, quarterback controversy, I think it's a mistake. So hopefully Brian Daboll, when he sleeps on it tonight, if the question comes up again, and I'm sure it will on Monday's conference, that he shuts it down before, God forbid, it sprouts wings. All right, coming up next, the trade deadline is less than 10 days away, October 31st. What are the Giants going to do? How does this win against Washington change their plans? We'll talk about that right after this. Hey, Giant fans, snap into NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. Their app is easy to use, and you can bet on everything from spreads to player props and more. And there's so much to bet on this time of year. There's the baseball playoffs, hockey's starting up soon, the NBA is starting up soon, and of course, NFL action every week from now until the end of the year and beyond. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get started. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Hey, Giant fans, the Locked On Giants Insiders Club is where you get exclusive content delivered directly to your phone, such as private Q&A videos, obscure stats, and so much more. Plus, members can keep the conversation going with me one-on-one via text. Already dozens of Giant fans have become part of this exclusive community, and I'd like to invite you to try it out as well. For more information or to register for your free, no obligation 14-day trial, visit joinsubtext.com/lockedonnygiants. Again, that URL is joinsubtext.com/lockedonnygiants. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. You just got me this week, Patricia Traina, and I'm talking about the Giants win over the Washington Commanders 14-7. So hopefully you're enjoying the show. In this segment, so now that the Giants have won, what does this mean for them as the trade deadline approaches? Are the Giants going to get rid of guys? Are they going to be sellers, buyers? What exactly are they going to do? Right now, folks, what I can tell you is I don't believe the Giants are necessarily planning to go aggressively into buying contracts or acquiring contracts. I also don't think they're going to really, make a big splash as far as trading away guys. Now, one guy I know a lot of people like to ask about is Saquon Barkley and if he's going anywhere. I don't think he is, folks. And, we asked that of Saquon tonight, and Saquon basically said that Daboll and Shane had a conversation with him and said, you're not going anywhere. We're not planning to trade you. And then Saquon kind of joked. He says, well, had we lost this game, my butt would have been out of here, which may or may not have been the case. But anyway, Saquon's a core member of this team. And yes, he's not under contract for next year. And yes, they're going to have to go through the song and dance that they went through this year if they want to retain him. But who knows? Maybe the fact that the Giants had, some leverage in terms of they can use the franchise tag again. And Saquon, of course, with the injury again to the lower body, maybe loses some leverage. Maybe the two sides, get together and next year is not an issue. But that's down the line. That's certainly down the line. So what about the rest of the team? Is there anybody that maybe the Giants will look to move? Well, some people have thought Adoree Jackson, especially considering how well the youngsters have played at cornerback, Trey Hawkins and Deonte Banks. With Jackson, I would say, depending on his neck situation, he missed this week's game with a neck. And unless, that thing is not a long-term deal, which a neck can be, I don't think Adoree's going anywhere. I think the guy that makes the most sense to move, if they can find a buyer for his contract, would be Leonard Williams. At this point, if you're going with the youth movement, and which it seems like the Giants are doing as part of this stage in the rebuild, why not get DJ Davidson and Jordan Riley more reps for Leonard Williams at that spot and see what you got with those two guys? Jordan Riley was inactive today for this week's game. He's been inactive before, as has DJ Davidson, who, by the way, when he is active, doesn't get a whole lot of snaps. So maybe if you're Joe Shane, if you could find a buyer for Leonard Williams, and for the buyer to acquire Leonard Williams, they would be looking at having to spend about $9.5 million of their salary cap space. So you would need a team that has space to do it. Why wouldn't you look to try and move that contract? You're not re-signing Leonard Williams next year because he just, his performance has kind of started to decline a little bit, even though today was his best game, this season. But, if you could get something like, think back to, a few years ago when the Giants traded Damon Harrison. I believe they traded him to Detroit and they got a 5th round pick. If you can move Leonard Williams and get a 5th rounder, why wouldn't you do it? Plus, you're opening up salary cap space. Now, I've talked about this before on the show. It's not like the Giants have to sign, a gazillion guys, for salary cap purposes. But that being said, it would be nice to have some space. So if you want to try and up your ante for Saquon, for example, or, if there's a free agent offensive lineman you want to add, or a free agent at another position that you want to add, now you've got even more room to work with. Because look, if the Giants finish in the top 10 in the draft order, they're going to need to put aside a big chunk of that cap space to pay for their rookie class. So there's going to be fat trimmed off of the Giants salary cap. Mark Lewinsky won't be here, obviously, but there's also going to be a lot of dead money hitting the cap. And I'm not talking, a few bucks. I'm talking several million that's going to eat into their cap space. So down the line, I'll do a whole show about that. Right now it's too early to talk about that. But as it stands related to the trade deadline, if you're the Giants, you're not looking to, everything must go, like Crazy Eddie, the old Crazy Eddie commercials where everything must go because prices are insane. No, you're not looking to do that. But if you can maybe unload where you have an abundance, another position where they have an abundance of talent that they're really not using is at receiver. So maybe see if a team could use a Paris Campbell. All right. Paris Campbell was brought on, you figured, because Wandale at the time was on PUP, rehabbing from a torn ACL. Now that Wandale is healthy, you move on. Paris Campbell's a good player, but he's kind of collecting dust on this roster. So why not look to move on from him? Makes too much sense, I think. So that's how I think the Giants will look to approach the trade deadline. Maybe look to move guys where they have young and upcoming talent that they want to get on the field. Now, the win against Washington basically saved the Giants season, or basically gave them a reprieve. So, there's got to be a balance, obviously, of, okay, do we want to divest ourselves of our senior talent, our veteran talent, and roll with the young kids who are likely to make mistakes and whose mistakes could end up costing us? That's a decision they have to make. But I think one that they need to make and should make, because this team, as currently constructed, is not a playoff team. And I know, some of you are going to get mad at me for saying that, but they have shown they are not ready for the bright lights. They cannot hold up against the better competition, the teams that they would face in the playoffs. So just continue the rebuild, continue to develop, your young talent, and then see what you've got. Oh, and by the way, also make some tweaks on your coaching staff, which I believe are coming, by the way. Again, that's a topic we'll talk about down the line. Too early to talk about that. So, all right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Hope you enjoyed the program. Thank you, as always, for tuning in, making us your first listener of the day, or if you watch on YouTube, your first watch of the day. Be sure to keep it here all week long. I'll have all new episodes of Locked On Giants this week coming up. It's the Battle of New York, the Jets versus the Giants. So Thursday will be our crossover show, and then we'll just keep on rolling with all the content you need about your New York Giants. So thank you again for tuning in. I'm Patricia Traynor, your host, and I will see you tomorrow.